Hello and welcome to the Final Fantasy set re-review. In this video, I will be going over some of my set review and talking about Final Fantasy as a limited set, how much I liked it. As the set winds down, and this is just sort of the new cycle of things, right? We only had Final Fantasy for about a month and a half, and we were already headed on to the next new shiny thing in Magic the Gathering, and it's a shame. And we'll get to my rating for Final Fantasy at the end of this video, but it is safe to say that it is one of my favorite limited formats in quite a long time. So, without further ado, let's get into some of the cards I got wrong. This time I have limited it to specifically five that I want to talk about. These kind of got out of hand, and I wanted to sort of shorten them back up again. And we're going to start with Cornered by Black Mages. It's the card that I was the most wrong about. It might be the worst. I think it may be the worst take I've ever had about a card. I mean, it's probably at least a common. I think it's my worst grade on a common since maybe Prickly Pear in OTJ last year, where I put that in tier one. It was sort of the opposite problem. I was way too high on that. This one I was way too low on. And really, what happened with Corner by Black Mages is a number of things. So the first thing is the double black was actually fine. Like, it didn't matter that much. I think this card actually was better than Murder, which I would never have said that because this sack effect for 3 mana just looks so bad. Like, we had this effect in Phyrexia Albi 1 with 2 in a black, sacrifice something your opponent gets. I think it was 1 or 2 poison counters, and that card was terrible. It wasn't completely unplayable, but it was terrible. And this to me looked like, oh, it's harder to cast, and you're getting this 0-1 that doesn't really do anything. But that's sort of like that was sort of a huge part of the evaluation that was wrong. As the 0-1s were actually really good. The 0-1 wizards were insanely good. There's a reason they didn't make them 1-1s. I I should have kind of ticked a box in my head of like, oh, these are good. But then there was like the red 1/3 that made an 0-1 that actually wasn't a very good card. So it's kind of like the 0-1s weren't like just good. Anything that made them wasn't just good, but non-creature spells that made them were really good because they also triggered them. And so that allowed for there to be more, you're getting stuff on both sides, right? And to be honest with you, part of the evaluation too is I thought this card would be bad because of job select, right? You're making this, and then they still just sack their 1/1 token. But honestly, that was never really that bad. You were still one for wanting them, right? You were getting a 1/1 token, they were sacking a 1/1 token. Their equipment was going to cost a bunch of mana to equip again. And yeah, and obviously there were some times where this didn't play very well, but I think in aggregate it's one of Black's better commons, and I think this was kind of like a deck. Like, building this sort of wizard deck was a thing, and I think this was actually a huge part of the success of that deck. Nibelheim of Flame. I don't love talking about mythics on my stuff I got right and wrong because it sort of takes up more space. This is just a classic, like a little bit stubborn for me. I kind of was like, well, I didn't like Waltz of Rage that much. I thought people overrated it, especially like good players. It was kind of like a card that feels really good when it works and is like not as good when it doesn't. This one, 1 mana cheaper. I didn't give enough credit for that. Also, the second copy of it just sitting in the graveyard with flashback, where it's just kind of like, well, I can't play creatures anymore because my opponent is just going to use this spell and then kill all my creatures. And that was just sort of, it just kind of completely dominated the game. Fortunately, I cast this card many more times than it was cast against me. I had a deck with 2 of these in this format, which was fun. I forget if I actually trophied with that deck or not. I think I did. I'm pretty sure I at least got 6 wins with it. But it was this ended up being a very good card, and I think just part of the thing too is there were a lot of creatures with high toughness and low power that you could get to survive with this, and I think that was part of the reason it was more successful as well. And also, just again, there are a lot of tokens that your opponent can have. It was really easy to make this good for you, and especially getting a second cast of it was way too good. Pretty Wanderings. So this card, I got a little hasty on this. And a lot of the reason why is it had a lot of combinations of like lines of text that we don't really see. So first it was an instant speed ramp spell, which is pretty rare. You don't see that very frequently. Um, Not that that matters too much, but it does matter a little bit in some spots. The +1/+1 counter plus getting a land plus it being an instant I thought would be enough. Part of the problem with this is that green's two common 2-drop really is like Town Greeter, and putting a +1/+1 town counter on Town Greeter like doesn't really matter that much. It's almost like bad because you kind of want to have your Town Greeter sitting around and just be like, oh well, I'll just chump something and gain 4 at some point over the course of the game. Like that's almost a better utility for your Town Greeter, or the Town Greeter can just block the 1 toughness equipment creatures for 2, which already exist. And this making it into a 2/2 basically didn't do anything, and that was kind of a problem. So you needed to have a 2-drop that was not Town Greeter for this to do something, and that just really didn't exist in green all that much. Like you could put it on the 1/1 Death Toucher, but again, like that's a 1-drop, and also it's a Death Touch creature that you don't really like. A +1/+1 counter on a Death Touch creature is just not a combination that is super efficient. Like you just don't really care so much, and so I think this card did suffer a lot from the environment around it. Like you would think the landfall and instant speed would be good. The landfall mostly gave power and not toughness, and that's there's a reason for that is because if you do this and have landfall give toughness, it sort of becomes just a blowout city. But I do think I got a little hasty on this type of effect being a strong card. I think no matter what, this would never have been something that you first pick, even though it looks strong, just because it doesn't add the body to the board. If it made a 1/1, like, I think part of it is I was like, oh, if it just made a 1/1 token, it would be so insane. And it would. It would have been. The problem is that it doesn't do that. A 1/1 counter is about half to a third as good as making a 1/1 token. So that was really the issue there. Freya Crescent. So the Freya Crescent issue highlights that equipment was not as big of a deal. It also highlights that red was not really a base color that you played a ton in this format. Like you were kind of using red spells to support either your blue or your white cards, or maybe your black. Like there were red cards that supported the blue cards, the black cards, and the white cards. This one really only supported the white cards, and so it was just not a super high priority. You really wouldn't pick it high. Red white wasn't the best deck in the format, so this card just didn't perform as well. If red white had been the best deck in the format, this would be performing as good as Sahagin, and if then Sahagin would be performing as good as this card. It really is just a matter of, well, one of these was better and one of them was worse, and so the win rates and the pick rates adjust accordingly. Still a powerful card. I actually think it's quite good. It's a very good card in the equipment deck. It being a legend actually does matter, though. So it kind of it is worse, I think, than it reads, because it's like, oh, it's a 1 mana elf and like red white. It has flying to attack. It's like, oh wow, that's like a lot. And then it just kind of doesn't really play out as well as it reads, I think, and that's that's something to think about. And the final card that I feel like talking about getting wrong in the set review, Aerith Rescue Mission. So this is just a complete, like, I just didn't look at the history on this. I was like, oh, Captain Skull, that's like pretty okay. But this just doesn't work with anything going on in the set. Like technically green white like goes wide a little bit, but not even really there. And then like the other mode is just horrendous. Like it's like sleep but worse. I don't know what I was thinking with this one. I really just don't. I have no idea. I don't know what I was thinking. I could not tell you what on earth got into my head making this like a good card. It was truly just not play. Like you just don't ever need to put this card in your deck. There's so many good 4s in white and other colors. On to the cards I got right. First of which being White Orisite. I highlighted this in my best of the set review. Yeah, the comparables to Buried in the Garden were indeed correct. Artifact being a type that matters was a thing. Like, double pip, ignoring the double pip, I think was smart. That was an intelligent thing to believe, is that double pip doesn't matter that much with this particular card. The fact that it adapts to add mana to equip stuff just really does it all, and I feel very happy with my rating on White Orisite. Swallowed by Leviathan, another one that just kind of like on the long list of legacies of counterspells that people I think have somewhat underrated at times. Some people anyway. I think people are catching on at this point that these type of counterspells are just good. I think there are some people that are still behind the times on this. So I did want to highlight this. Single pipped, basically cancel with card advantage or card selection effect is going to just be a good card. Refute we saw in, you know, Foundations. That card was great. I predicted it to be great. This card is probably about the same as Refute because it's only single pipped and because you're getting a Surveil 2 is just worse than a loot. But no, it's not so much worse than a loot that it's different. It's different than looting. It's. I think this card is about as good as Refute is. Refute was a common in Foundations. I think this is about that good at the end of this format. And it just was powerful. It just goes in any blue deck, and it can counter pretty much anything and give you some value. Circle of Power. Weird that I got this right, or I feel like I got it right. The 4 mana draw 2, lose 2, and do something else has been pretty bad, and like to the point of being unplayable for a while. And I kind of I bumped it. I put this one in an ambitious tier 3, which you could say, well, that's actually a coward's rating because you're just saying it's going to be average. But I think that was very right, and also like not necessarily a consensus pick. It's again, it is weird that I got this right and got the corner by Black Mages so wrong because I was like, oh, this makes a guy and it gives your stuff lifelink and whatever. And I just kind of like missed, like I don't know, I don't really know what happened there. Like the wires got crossed somewhere. Like somehow I managed to find on this like what I was missing on the other thing, which is like you're getting a body and you're getting this effect that's pretty good, and then the wizard's getting +1/+0 and getting lifelink didn't really do anything. I cast this card a number of times, and that effect did almost nothing ever. It was just a 4 mana spell as well that came up, and also just making the wizard was good. I don't know. I just somehow managed to correctly evaluate how good a wizard token was on this card and not on the other card. Esper Origins, again a rare, but I do think a very confusing and hard to evaluate rare. A rare that is strange and doesn't necessarily fit in like a box. It's like, okay, so would you play a 2 mana Surveil 2, gain 2 life? No, you would not. That card is terrible. But it essentially draws you a card, which is a 4-drop that does the same thing, and then that one draws you a card, which is really strong. It was, you could say, oh, well, what are you talking about being right on this? It's just a weird card, and it was kind of hard to evaluate, and it didn't do anything when you cast it for 2, on the battlefield. And the 4 mana mode, it's like, well, you kind of like gotta cast it, and then, but the fact that you get the cast trigger again, technically this is like you could say this is wrong because it should be in tier 1 because that's how good it is. I would take it over most of the cards in the set because it's it is green, so maybe you could say tier 2 is actually fine because green, you want to start green. We're kind of back to that era. But yeah, Esper Origins, I think we were pretty happy with the result of evaluating a very like weird card, very strange card that didn't really make a lot of sense. And the card that I feel good about hating on because people continue to try to like believe in these guys that tap down on attacks, and this is a 3 mana 2/1. I kind of like really can't believe they printed this in 2025. It's just an archetype of card that hasn't really had a place in limited for a very very long time, and it just isn't good. Like it's just a 3-drop with no ETB, and the tap ability is really mediocre in a set with a bunch of 1/1s. And it's not an artifact, so you need to. It's one of your slots in your deck that isn't an artifact. It just doesn't. I think if they make this an artifact creature, it's actually kind of interesting. I don't know. And now we're gonna talk about the set overall, and I'm giving it a 10 out of 10. It's the first time I've given it a 10 out of 10 to any limited set in my evaluating era. I don't really think there's anything I could ask for more in a limited set. I think this is as good as it gets. This is going to join the pantheon for me of 10 out of 10 sets with March of the Machine. That was the last one that I was like, yep, this is a 10 out of 10. I love this. I would say this is going to be on that list. Um, Everything felt good, right? The gameplay was like complex, but also rewarding a lot of like gaining of incremental value. That's how I like playing limited. I like to gain incremental value over time, make trades, make good trades. Have the game go a little bit long, run my opponent out of resources. That's how I like to play. This set was really, really good for that. Um, the colors, it might be the most balanced format ever from a color strength perspective, I think, if I had to do a ranking of colors, I would put blue at 1, black at 2, white 3, and then like green and red tied. You could really put them in any order, and I would listen to you. The color I liked drafted the most was blue. In best of 3, it was black because people had valued it a little bit less. You can see Resentful Revelation on the screen, a card that I didn't include about being right, but I do think people underrate it. I did not underrate it pre-format. I think I gave it, I put it in tier 3. I think a lot of people had it lower than that. I do think that was a take that I ended up being quite right on. Um, just a really solid card and sort of exemplifies why I liked this format and why I was good at this format. Why this format was successful for me. It was in the top 250 in June. I could maybe be in the top 250 this month. I don't think the format's it's not gonna last till the end of the month, so it's gonna be kind of probably not gonna happen. Um, the you could just draft normally. Like, you could just draft a good two-color deck in this format and have that be a good deck. It was kind of refreshing. Tarkir got really, really boring. I think part of the reason this set feels like such a 10 out of 10 for me is how much I soured on Tarkir at the end. Like, how boring it was to just be like, okay, it's 5 colors or Boros again. And, like, that was really it. And this format is so different from that experience where it's like, oh, I can just draft anything and it's like and there's just something there. There's something to do everywhere. I thought the Towns deck would be better than it was. That didn't end up panning out. I thought that would probably be the best deck. That didn't happen. It was good though. I think it's the first time in a while that they really, really nailed the power level on that deck. The like land heavy deck. Usually it's either the best deck or unplayable. Like the Deserts deck from OTJ last year was just the best deck by such a huge margin, and then the format was worse because of that. This format, the town deck was good, and you could play it, and the cards were strong, but it wasn't so good that was like, oh, I'm gonna take the a town back one pick one just because the town's deck's so good, and I think that's really good for balance reasons. Another thing to highlight about this set, the card designs are simple. They're like they're not overly complex, and there's not like a ton of like text on them. To be honest with you, it's just hey, this is what the card does. A lot of the stuff was like about mana values and making some tokens. Like the wizard tokens aren't the easiest thing to read ever of all time, but on Arena they played pretty well, easy to use. I think the sort of the final note in favor of this set is that flashback. It's it's the best limited mechanic of all time for me. It's in pretty much every set on 1 or 2 cards. This set had more of it than usual. I love that. I'm not saying that I want to see it like this much of it in every limited set because it would probably get a little bit boring, but I do, it is just kind of for me, the quintessential how I like to play. It's the reason I like Thraben Inspector as like the best, like that's my best common. That's the card that I'm taking out of every pack because it's like, yep, there's this thing that gives me a little bit of advantage now and a little bit of advantage later, and it's about when do I use that and how do I use that. And there's all these different ways to like use the flashback card from your graveyard. I think it's a great mechanic, and it being a focal point of any limited set is going to make that set something I really like. I'm really hoping that someday they bring back Disturb from Midnight Hunt because that is, you know, the flashback of creatures, and it was, they kind of did bring back Disturb with Esper Origins. They did kind of bring that back. So that's it for this set. That's it for Final Fantasy. Going to end up being one of my favorite limited sets of all time. I think it's truly kind of sad that it's going away faster than Tarkir did, and faster than either Drift did. Um, but I'm glad for the time that it was here, and I'm looking forward to always, new content is always fun as well. So that being said, thank you for joining me, and I will see you for the new set review.